Amorim or De Zerbi, who would you want as Chelsea's next head coach? And Brentford set-piece guru that Chelsea are looking to add to their new department. Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again. New show on this Tuesday to go through some of the latest stories around Stamford Bridge. I hope you've had a really good start to your week. Chelsea not playing any football until next Monday against Newcastle, so just under a week away, and it's quite nice because we have had quite a few midweek games recently to kind of catch our breath, and especially after the frustration of Saturday, to kind of reflect a little bit more before we face Newcastle on Monday evening. We're going to start off with these stories that have come out regarding potential Pochettino replacements. Jacob Steinberg for The Guardian reporting that Chelsea have identified Ruben Amorim, of course of Sporting Lisbon, and Roberto De Zerbi, currently head coach of Brighton, as potential replacements for Mauricio Pochettino. Steinberg reports that there is currently little desire from the Todd Bowley Clearlake Capital ownership to rush into a decision on Pochettino, who is being given an opportunity to continue in the job. Bowley and Clearlake are looking for a continuity after employing 4 managers last season. However, Chelsea are taking a long-term view and hope to be ready should they decide to go in a different direction. They are both assessing Amorim, who is impressed at Sporting, and De Zerbi, who could leave Brighton at the end of the season. De Zerbi is on Liverpool's shortlist to replace Jurgen Klopp and is of interest to Man United should they sack Erik ten Hag. My initial reaction is one of, well, this is the place Chelsea find themselves in, and why the current market actually that's going to probably transpire over the summer for managers is not that brilliant for Chelsea, because you have Jurgen Klopp leaving Liverpool. That's a massive gaping hole that club is going to have to fill with someone. Thomas Tuchel is leaving Bayern Munich. Xavi is leaving Barcelona. Ten Hag could still leave Man United. Of course, that's not as concrete as the others, but we could see a scenario play out where he leaves Man United. And then, of course, Pochettino could leave Chelsea, and it very much leaves a massive scrap, doesn't it, of who's the most attractive, some of those top coaches. And I don't think, other than, you'd put Tuchel there, you'd definitely put Xabi Alonso if he decides to leave Leverkusen at the end of the season. But I think he'd be more likely to go to Liverpool, to be honest, or even Bayern Munich. I couldn't see him moving elsewhere. So it's a difficult moment for Chelsea, and I think that's why these two names have come up. Now, this is not to try and completely demean the two names being listed, but I do think that it again strikes at the core of some of the problems that Chelsea have found in the past year, and why, despite my current opinion about Pochettino, which I'm not that enthusiastic about the current team, the direction of it, I'm concerned that we are heading in kind of quite a reactive direction. And whether that's all down to Pochettino, or you put any coach in this situation and they're probably falling foul to similar things, is, I think, a relevant point. I don't think you can just throw it to the side and go, no, Pochettino is the real problem. Because we were saying 12 months ago, Graham Potter was the real problem. And in 12 months' time, if things are kind of the same, we'll be saying that head coach is the real problem. And again, I think people have to start to realise that, like, doing that over and over again, at some point, surely, like Groundhog Day, you've got to be like Bill Murray and go, I'm experiencing the same thing over and over again. Something is wrong here. And that's when I always think it's important to then look above, look at the system that is making objectively, and I think a lot of times really good coaches turn into something else and look actually like they're being undermined, look like they don't have the minerals or don't have the tactical nous to deal with the current squad. So that is all needs to be taken into account. I mean, Ruben Amorim I know less of than De Zerbi. Obviously, De Zerbi's been in the Premier League for over a year now, and I think people don't like De Zerbi and want to rubbish him. But I think objectively, it's very difficult to completely dismiss the work he's done at Brighton, because they've got into European football. They're in the European knockout stages as well. And given where Brighton are, given their history, this is, still a really good season for them. Trying to probably get European football again, on course to do that again. And this is all while, losing Moises Caicedo, who Brighton fans themselves have said was probably one that they really feared losing and have felt losing. And as well, McAllister to Liverpool too. So, and they're likely to lose big players again because that's their model. And I think De Zerbi has done a lot of good things. I think he's done interesting things. I think he helped to develop Levi Colwill last year, absolutely. But what we saw with Graham Potter, I fear, similar with De Zerbi, is that you take someone from an environment that is best suited to his style of football. That has, it was a smooth transition from Graham Potter, what he had built, onto De Zerbi, and it's one of those things that we talk about. Or I actually don't think we talk about it enough, because as Chelsea fans, we just kind of go, well, it's a given, right? But like it's not to do with tactics. It's not really to do with player profiling, which I'm not saying are irrelevant. It's to do with the size of the task at hand, and all of those things that you don't get at Brighton, which you do get at Chelsea. And it's to do with the pressure. It's to do with the worldwide global scrutiny that comes on your shoulders in that dugout that you don't get at a majority of clubs in world football. Brighton get a lot of praise, but if they fail at the weekend, if they go on a run of games where they don't win, De Zerbi, outside of Brighton fans, outside of the local media, is not really going to be getting that much flack, if we're being honest. Like, most people don't watch Brighton on a regular basis. So, like, the average pundit is going to sit there and go, he's still doing a good job. And then they'll watch his team against another big team, and Brighton will usually do something good. And they'll go, oh, look how great Brighton are. There isn't that kind of specific detail and constant reporting of Brighton's interests that there is at Chelsea. So that was the case 5 years ago. That was the case 10 years ago. On top of that, now you've got the chaos and the massive washing machine of like turning around and chaos of personnel coming in and out, a new squad. And then also on top of that, fans who feel very disconnected from the current group of players. And I don't see that change in direction coming anytime soon. I don't see much optimism that situation is going to be improved this summer, which is not nice. But I think, you want to live in reality, and I want to be proven wrong. But I mean, all the evidence suggests that the current ownership and the current sporting directors think they're doing a wonderful job and may just be going down the same path again. So with all of that said, it's not that it doesn't matter what level of tactical coach you are, but you need to be a sort of character to come into this situation, a divided fan base, a chaotic club, a young group of players, and you need to, and the expectation and pressure, and you need to be able to blend all of that together. It takes a massive weight of personality to do that. And I'm not quite sure whether De Zerbi is that character. I'm not quite sure whether Ruben Amorim, despite his interesting work with Sporting Lisbon, where, in their league, again, not the same level of competition in the Premier League. They don't have the same weight of expectation. Or, Chelsea are competing with not just one or two other big clubs in their country. They are dealing with multiple big clubs and new ones that have come across in recent years who have investment that are going to compete with you. So that in itself, and look at the positioning of Chelsea over the past 2 seasons, they're nowhere near the top of the league. And as well, I do kind of wonder whether people are just looking at Amorim and looking at where he comes from and kind of just wanting to implant Jose vibes into him rather than actually looking at him specifically as a head coach. I think there are interesting things he's doing with that sporting team. They've had some good results in Europe, absolutely. They've beaten some Premier League teams in recent years, and he plays a 3-4-3. That brings with itself some positives and negatives from my side, because I look at him as a head coach and I think I can see how he'd use it in this squad. But then also we spent quite a lot of money trying to maybe get away from a 3-4-3. And then also on top of that, I have my major concerns when I saw Conte and Tuchel use that formation, is that I do think I've seen it have quite a short lifespan. And I think unless you are really progressive with it, and unless you are really profiling players properly, and as well as a coach, I think you are there for a long period of time, I kind of fear that it then just naturally, merges into this very kind of reactive style of play that actually leaves us with like 3 attackers on the pitch. That was the problem I think we absolutely had under Thomas Tuchel in the end, and also slightly in the second season under Antonio Conte. And recruitment, obviously, in any system is important. So you marry that all together, and I think at most for me, my position is I think it's best to leave Pochettino where he is until the summer. People aren't going to like that. They're not going to like that decision. And listen, I think that things could change, because I don't quite buy the briefing that they're sticking by him no matter what, because we heard exactly the same thing 12 months ago. And I think Chelsea could lose to Newcastle, we could lose to Leicester, and the weight of pressure could be so much that Chelsea then sack Mauricio Pochettino. Is there a financial element of this too, where Chelsea can't maybe afford to lose Mauricio Pochettino because they've sacked so many head coaches in the past 12 months? That in itself it could be a relevant part of it as well. And then also, what does that say to the outside world and to potential coaches? And we spoke about this last week. If you sack Mauricio Pochettino when you've basically bought a whole new squad the previous summer, where it doesn't seem like he himself as a head coach doesn't have a lot of say and influence over that situation of the recruitment, the buying, the selling. I don't know how attractive that job is. And it comes again to the very fundamental issue at the core of Chelsea that I'm going to keep coming back to, because I don't think you can avoid it. I don't think you can just throw it off to one side, because we're no longer in the Abramovich era where you can just go, well, look, we've won trophies like last year. Like, we keep on winning trophies. The coach is clearly, it was a lot more of a legitimate argument, even in the latter Abramovich years, to make that argument, as was proved with the Lampard-Tuchel change, right? But it's no longer valid, because Chelsea are again staring down the barrel of a trophyless mid-table season. And there's been a lot of faces that have come in and out of the dugout at that time, and we've seen a lot of similar flaws. So all of that coupled together, do you want another summer of upheaval? Is there actually some logic in, for once, giving a head coach time and then seeing if they can cultivate something? I do think, and I want to make this abundantly clear before we move on to the other story, is that Pochettino has a responsibility here, and I think his responsibility is to try and forge a connection with supporters. I know it's very difficult at the moment, and listen, there were always going to be supporters. I could have told you this 12 months ago. There were always going to be supporters who, because they hate Spurs so much, were never going to find a connection, want to open themselves up to liking Pochettino. And I think that's not the reason you don't try. Just because there is a segment of fans who are going to go to that at the first sign of trouble does not mean that is a match-winning argument. You just put that card down and it's game over. And actually, there's no point me trying to make the fans, like me, grow that connection, because it's never going to happen. I think there is a massive segment of fans at Stamford Bridge currently who go to games home and away, who feel a real disconnect with the club and feel a real disconnect with the players, with the coaching staff, with the ownership especially, and don't feel like the team represents them. They are longing for something to reconnect them. And I think that just kind of accepting like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that Pochettino just goes, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't like that. That's not a mentality I want to see at Chelsea. That's not an attitude I want to see from a Chelsea head coach. I want this to be a unified vision. I want you to feel that you are a figurehead. That's what Tuchel did so brilliantly, right? For all his flaws in the latter time at Chelsea, he was a great statesman. And I think he fundamentally understood that there needed to be a connection between supporters and the coach and the players. I don't get that sense from Pochettino. He isn't making that effort. And I think the less he makes that effort, the more distance there's going to be. And even those like myself who are maybe more liking towards Pochettino and weren't going to throw the towel in at the first sign of struggle, even us, we go, well, mate, you're not helping yourself here. So you've got to try and make that connection. And listen, the easiest way is winning games. Like you're not going to be able to make a connection by losing every week. Obviously, that's just like a given. But when we do win games, why not? And again, it may seem performative, it may seem cliche, it may seem cheesy, but like go up to the Matthew Harding lower, go around the stands, like actually show appreciation to supporters. When we're away from home and we win a game and get a good result, go away to those supporters and show them something, because something surprising may happen. Like those fans may actually not turn around and just abuse her all day. They may actually go, actually, he's trying. He's trying to forge a connection with us. And I'd hope the open-minded part of Chelsea's fan base, who aren't just like giving up on Pochettino, will see that and go, fair enough. He's trying to make an effort. The Sarri thing is a great example here in terms of like Sarri, despite doing objectively well, never wanted to make that connection and never even attempted to. And that's why a lot of fans, I felt, had a very, distant look of him and didn't have much, empathy towards him, didn't really engage with him as a character. That intangible thing, but it's important. If Pochettino does stay here, trying to improve set pieces is obviously going to be a massive part of it. And Matt Law reported last week that we're going to be recruiting specialists in set pieces to work in a newly created club-wide department. And someone who works for a team we just played, Brentford, Cueva, is understood to be one of the men on the radar of Chelsea who believe their opponents last Saturday, Brentford, are one of the best examples of maximising set pieces. Brentford have been one of the most effective teams at set pieces for some time, while Aston Villa have a set piece specialist and Forest employed one at the end of last year. Injuries have impacted Brentford's stats this season, Matt Law reports, but only Arsenal and Man City have conceded fewer goals from set pieces than Frank's team before last weekend's game, although Chelsea had scored 2 more from set pieces than the Bees. Chelsea say that Pochettino is involved in the process of creating this department, despite sources stating otherwise, and the head coach dismissing the importance of specialists last month. Pochettino did say football belongs to the players, not to the specialists, and suggested the club should look to the summer transfer market to improve their set-piece record. So again, kind of clashing stories over how much involvement Pochettino is going to have. It does seem like, again, I trust a lot of what Matt Law has to say. At the very least, we can assume that a department is being set up in regards to this. Whether Pochettino is even here by the summer is of course a massive question on that, but it needs to be resolved, right? And again, this is maybe where we put the balance right of like coaching issue, club issue. Where do you put that balance? And I think it is a coaching issue, absolutely, and where you can, and I have consistently throughout the season, Chelsea have been woeful at times defending set pieces, not just set pieces, but balls into the box. The amount of times I've seen Chelsea get done quite easily with a ball into the box, and the header, the first point of contact is always going to an opposition player. It's just tragic. And again, that's something that is quite simple and I think should be fixed and doesn't need a spreadsheet to figure out. Are we just not buying the right defenders? I'm not quite sure about that, because I think some of the defenders we do have in our team are good enough to perform in those moments. But when we keep on conceding goals the same way, I think, we naturally we look at trends, right? And we go, well, this keeps on happening. And is it just all on the players, or can you look towards the head coach? But people maybe mock this. I saw some people saying, why are we taking lessons from Brentford? Arsenal have had an incredible record from set pieces this season. I know some of you open play assists people don't think that assists from set pieces count, but they actually do. When you score a goal from a set piece, it counts as much as a goal from open play. It counts the same on the scoreboard. And it's a big way of changing the trajectory of games. If you're on the back foot, if you have something... For years, think about the best Chelsea teams, how good they were at set pieces, how many goals came from JT, how many goals came from Branislav Ivanovic, how many goals came even from Gary Cahill in those moments. Like that's important. It makes a difference in games. It really does. And we haven't been maximising corners for a long time. It's become a joke how poor we are at set-piece delivery. Like the number of times over recent years where I've been sat at the bridge, we get a corner and you go, yeah, could we just beat the first man? And we fail to beat the first man. It's offensively and defensively, it has been a problem for some time. And if you're not maximising that, what could win you cup finals, what could save you from losing cup finals, then you're just being silly, right? And because people maybe look at set pieces like, oh, it isn't as flashy as constructing 9,000 passes in one piece of play, that then maybe not leads to a good chance, rather than looking at a moment within a game that is going to happen in every single game you play, where you're going to have to defend and take set pieces. Most likely, it's very rarely do you go through a game without conceding a corner, without conceding some form of set piece that goes inside your box that you're going to have to defend. These are big things. And you think about some of the goals Chelsea have conceded from set pieces and how different this season could have been. You think about the League Cup final, obviously quite recently. You think about earlier in the season, goals that were conceded from set pieces, and not even directly from set pieces. I mean, I look at, say, the Michael Elise goal, which I believe came off the back of a corner. I look at goals that we conceded against Man City earlier in the year that came from a short corner. It's really bad, and it needs to be improved. We conceded from a corner against Everton earlier in the year. These are moments that define seasons, and I don't blame the club for looking at it and trying to improve it, and hopefully they can, because I think it can make a real difference, as Arsenal found out. Because Arsenal, for a lot of this season, especially the first half of the season, they're really flying now, but like for the first half of the season, they weren't playing that well, but they were getting wins on the board, they were getting points on the board because they were so effective at set pieces. And that's not a coincidence. That's clearly something they focused on, and it's kept them at a level of competition that has meant they're now in a title race. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below and all the stories we talked about today.